Well, hello, and welcome again to the Resilience Advantage. My name is Evan Reese, and on behalf of the U.S. Resiliency Council and our series sponsor, Optimum Seismic, I'd like to welcome you to our 12th episode designed to recap the Resilience Advantage webinar series for 2021. We hope you've learned a great deal during our early webinars. And if this is your first time with us, we hope you'll enjoy looking back with us. And of course, you can always access previous episodes on our website. So our goal in this series has been to tell the story of how investing in readiness for natural disasters benefits everybody. Each episode is focused on specific parts of the story. Prior episodes on topics such as policies needed before earthquakes, resilient communities, resilient new construction, and retrofitting existing buildings have all shared important information around this theme. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the important nuggets of information that have been shared previously in our program. We hope you find these points to be as interesting as we have in going back over the episodes and seeing how they really come together and relate to that single theme of the advantage of resilience. So, in addition, we really hope you take the information that you see today seriously. I mean, the risks of earthquakes and other disasters are very real in California and other states and seismic areas or areas at risk of high wind or flooding. But the good news is there are a lot of things you can do to protect yourself and your loved ones, as well as your business and community. And we hope that we've shown that throughout this series. The U.S. Resiliency Council, it's a nonprofit organization. We were founded 10 years ago, and our mission was to improve community resilience one building at a time. We use our building performance rating systems, educational programs such as the Resilience Advantage, and coalition building with key stakeholders to make our built environment, your buildings, your homes and businesses, more sustainable, prosperous, and resilient. So if you want to learn more about the resilience movement, I invite you to go to our website at usrc.org. Now, this series would not have been possible without the generous sponsorship of Optimum Seismic and Ali Sahabi, one of its founders in particular. He's been a great partner and friend in helping us produce this series and bringing together a lot of the experts that you've heard over the past 12 months. And one person in particular that we're very grateful to have, in fact, she was with us at the beginning when we sort of launched this series back last October, is Maria Salinas, the CEO of the LA Chamber. And so I'm going to ask Ali to come on, say a few words, introduce her, and then we'll get to hear a few words from Maria. Ali?
Very much, Evan. Thank you for the introduction. Uh, this is a very special moment. We are at the final episode of our first series of Resilience Advantage. This has been in the works for more than 2 years. And before I introduce our special guest, I want to take this moment to thank a few individuals that have really made all of these wonderful episodes possible for all of us. And particularly my members of my team, Tom Robinson and Andrea Aguilar. The two of them were instrumental. And on behalf of USRC, of course, Evan and his creativity, leadership, and as I always tell him, he's a special kind of an engineer. He's not. He thinks much more diverse, and he has even potential of producing films and movies. So, but because of his creativity, but him and Cheryl Rabanovich, who without their support, we wouldn't have really been able to make this series happen. Also, there is one other person, David Scharf. David Scharf is the owner of Compassion Unlimited. He's the producer, and he's the one of the first individuals that we talked about when we initially conceived this idea, and he's been instrumental every episode. He's been so we really appreciate his contributions, David. And without Certainly, without this wonderful team who spent hundreds of meetings, at least two that formally was set up every week throughout this last year and a half that we were in production. So thank you to all of you. With that, I want to introduce my friend and our special guest today, Maria Salinas. Maria is, as you heard, is our CEO of Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, and there is basically a professional position that she has that amazingly respected in our business community, in our political community, and as the community as a whole. She's a very special individual. But one of the things that really that impressed me in these past couple of years, where we have been experiencing unprecedented times with this pandemic that none of us could have expected, is really speaks of her character and her why she is in the position where she is today. And that's normally when we have crisis, it's very easy to look the other way, forget about things, put things in the back burner. But I believe her true leadership, one of the examples was when we started talking about this to her and her staff before COVID. But when COVID happened, she saw the importance of staying on focus on this subject and why this is important, we cannot ignore. And she solidly stayed in support of our project. And that's why we're here today. That's why it's been successful time after time that she's been with us. And we really appreciate your participation. Thank you for your leadership. As a member of your board of directors, I want to let you know how proud I am of having you as our CEO. With that, I will turn it to you, Maria Salinas. Thank you.
Th- Thank you, Ali. Thank you so much for those very kind words. Truly appreciate you as our board member and the great contributions that you have made, not only on our board, but to this region in really understanding and knowing some of the pitfalls that we can have, and the way you bring it to life, the way you bring it forward is just something that is a fundamental area that needs to be addressed. And the conversations from previous to COVID, where we talked about resiliency and the need to make sure that there was a proper safety net, you were right. You were absolutely right. And I think the experience that we've had with COVID has only showed us how important this topic is and how important it was that we continue to educate ourselves, to bring the experts forward, to bring this topic top of mind. Because if there was one thing that this health crisis showed us, is that we need to be prepared for the next one. And we need to be prepared and ready as a community. So I want to thank you for your leadership and for not giving up on the series and making sure we're obviously very proud to be a partner with you. And Evan, thank you so much for your engagement on this. It's always wonderful to hear you speak about, shepherding us through this and what this has all meant. But for us at the chamber, I mean, certainly the lessons learned from the COVID pandemic, that it remains abundantly clear that we must be prepared for natural disasters in all the forms that they come in. This region, it's resilient and it's shown itself to be resilient. So we can't ease up on that fight to ensure that our communities and our livelihoods are secured, protected, and thriving. Los Angeles and the entire Southern California area is prone to unique concoction of natural disasters. You know, we've seen our fair share of fires and floods, and of course, earthquakes. And then this past year with the health crisis. We know that if we are to thrive, we must prepare for the next natural disaster, whatever that might be. A natural disaster preparedness is not just the key to safety in our region, it's the key to a resilient economy. And over the past year and into the future, the Chamber will continue its focus on helping businesses in our communities become adaptable while reflecting on how we can be ready for the next inevitable emergency. At the Chamber, we know preparedness is essential, which is why we host a slew of policymakers in a variety of forums to discuss preparedness and all the systems that go around becoming a resilient community. We are proud of our partnership with organizations like Optimum Seismic and all the work that has been done here. So thank you very much for having me.
Maria, thank you so much. I really appreciated getting to know you, your staff, others in the business community in Southern California this year. It's been really refreshing to me to see the interest that the business community has in resilience, because it affects you, it's important to you, and thank you for your support. We've had a number of major partners that have really helped support and get the word out on the Resilience Advantage series. Those include, of course, in addition to the LA Chamber, the LA County Business Federation, the LA County Economic Development Corporation, and again, this wouldn't have been possible without Optimum Seismic. And we've had many champions for each of our episodes who, again, have promoted it, have contributed great ideas on our panels. You can see the list of those organizations there. I want to thank them all for participating and really just adding a lot of depth to the Resilience Advantage. So with that, we're going to start, we're going to get ready to jump into our video. This recap episode, again, to revisit some of our sort of favorite themes from the past 12 months, looks how they combine, work together. We look at earthquake threats to our buildings, our communities, the people. We'll see how buildings and infrastructure can be made safer and more resilient to the destructive impacts of earthquakes. Overall, I think that you'll gain a better understanding through this episode of why resilience is good public policy, a good investment, good business for property owners, developers, and many other professionals wanting to protect their investments and our environment. As we start this video, again, I will echo what Ali said and thank David Sharf at Compassion Unlimited for his incredible work in making these videos happen and bringing them to reality. So with that, I hope you enjoy this recap episode, and we'll see you afterwards for our panel. Welcome to the final episode of our 12-part Resilience Advantage webinar series. I'm your host, Evan Reese. Over the past year, the U.S. Resiliency Council and our series sponsor, Optimum Seismic, along with more than 50 science, engineering, government, business, and nonprofit leaders, have brought you these programs to show how resilience has become an essential part of the movement to achieve sustainability, safety, and the protection of our economy in the face of ever-increasing natural disaster threats worldwide. The diversity of the experts and projects featured on the Resilience Advantage reflects how the performance of our buildings during earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, and wildfires affects everyone: building owners, tenants, our workforce, the financial industry, and our communities. The interest we've had in the Resilience Advantage over the past year, from the thousands of attendees at our webinars and viewers of these episodes, to the enthusiasm generated within the public and private sector, has demonstrated the power of the growing resilience movement that our series represents. We are re-envisioning what sustainability means and requires of the built environment. One of the key objectives of this series has been to deliver practical and timely strategies to make both our new and older buildings more resilient in ways that are both achievable and affordable. Given the advances in engineering and product innovation, being resilient just makes good economic sense. And with incentives that can spread the cost of retrofitting and performance-based design among all those who benefit from a more resilient built environment, the upfront costs don't have to come from just one source. When we launched the series in conjunction with the Great Shakeout at our press conference in 2020, our intention was to bring to light the knowledge of what resilience means and how that meaning has evolved. We looked at the common threads in different sectors that, when combined, showed a more holistic and more hopeful view of how we can achieve resilience and sustainability, no matter what the threat. In this episode, we will share some of the many highlights for the past 11 months and show how each episode came together around the theme of making our world more resilient. If there's one thing that 2020 and 2021 has taught our country and communities, it is that disasters often hit us without warning and can have catastrophic effects if we're not prepared. The COVID pandemic, wildfires in the West, hurricanes in the South, and record floods in the Northeast have made it abundantly clear that, as we've said many times in this series, disasters are a matter of when, not if. And if it's a challenge in California to imagine how we can prepare for the big one on the San Andreas Fault, imagine if the threat came from an unanticipated source.
The state is laced with many faults of many orientations. To pull one out of a hat that would be important, the Newport Inglewood Fault, which gave us the 1933 Long Beach magnitude 6.5 earthquake, ruptures all the way through central Los Angeles, right up to Century City and Beverly Hills. And there it joins the Santa Monica Malibu Fault, which heads west, and the Hollywood Fault, which heads east. The consequences of even a small earthquake on those faults is much higher than the San Andreas.
With San Diego having a longer fault rupture potential, we're now looking at earthquakes that are going to impact not just communities, but regions. And those regions are going to be stretched not only in damage, but also in response. Resources are now going to be taxed when the community that's been affected is much greater.
No matter where the threats come from, we have to ask ourselves, are we really ready?
You know, there's something fundamentally challenging about being ready for natural disasters. They happen in human history on a longer time scale than we're used to managing. We go through this cycle again and again of preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. The worst thing after a disaster is knowing what you should have done and didn't do beforehand in order to lessen its impact.
You're asking people to think about things that they don't like to think about. And especially when they think about their property, which is usually their largest financial asset, and that it might be at risk or exposed in terms of seismic risk, you start to see light bulbs go off. And I think that's really important because, you know, getting the public behind this, getting consensus around thought about seismic safety is huge.
We've stressed throughout the Resilience Advantage that good governance at the local, state, and national levels and resilience investment by the private sector are essential if we are to ensure that natural peril events do not become disasters.
We will not be able to respond to disasters but for governance, in other words, the collaboration of the various sectors coming together at various stages, pre and post disaster, to address the issue. Indeed, government actually has a substantial role in this orchestra of various actors coming together to govern.
It's a sobering reality that these impacts of natural disasters are increasing in the United States and around the world as a function of both climate change and infrastructure growth in high hazard areas.
There's no question that the impact on communities is no longer something that we can't focus on or only focus on in terms of relief. You know, maybe if it only happened truly once every 100 years, you wouldn't have to think so much about resilience.
We've seen with disasters like Superstorm Sandy in 2012 and the twin Christchurch earthquakes in 2010 and 2011 that when hurricanes or earthquakes destroy tens of thousands of buildings, the debris generated contributes enormously to negative environmental impacts by releasing toxic chemicals into the environment and causing the need to replace and rebuild potentially millions of tons of destroyed materials. Thus, resilience and green design are not separate, but rather complementary halves of the sustainability equation.
There's a Venn diagram of sustainability and resilience, and I think there's a significant amount of overlap. To me, in order to be a truly sustainable society or have a truly sustainable building, that means that it's resilient. That's how it's going to be sustained long term.
The good news is that professional architects and engineers are incorporating resilience into their designs as an integral component of their sustainability practices.
We're seeing that a focus on resiliency is really complementary to what we're already doing with LEED, and it's also becoming prevalent in how our clients are looking at their projects, how they design spaces to connect with their people, to support their people, be able to operate their businesses, and be able to respond in case there is some type of a catastrophic event.
One of the key objectives of the U.S. Resiliency Council is to communicate to the public and building stakeholders that the engineering science behind resilience is mature and capable of making our new and older building stock better able to withstand the current and future risks of natural hazards.
Over the last about 20 years, we've gone from being able to design buildings for safety objectives to being able to evaluate buildings looking at damage and looking at damage to individual components in the building, and doing that in a very complete way so that engineers can design to limit that damage and to get buildings to be functional more quickly after an earthquake.
We've discussed with nationally renowned structural engineering experts and researchers how older structures, including unreinforced masonry buildings, non-ductile concrete and steel structures, tilt-up construction, and soft-story wood frame buildings have been shown to be particularly vulnerable to the effects of earthquakes, potentially putting millions of lives and billions of dollars at risk. By testing the performance of these buildings using shake tables and computer simulations, we found ways to preserve and mitigate these buildings rather than replace them. We learned about companies that have created innovative products that protect buildings from the devastating effects of earthquakes, demonstrating that high technology isn't limited to phones and cars, but it can be employed on a building scale. The USRC's mission is to develop rating systems that measure and communicate building performance and natural hazards, including earthquakes, hurricanes, flood, and wildfire.
Rating systems are extremely important. They convey to the public what these buildings actually do in a natural disaster. So knowing that the U.S. Resiliency Council is actively looking at buildings and putting placards on there so when you walk in, you know that this building is safe. It's very similar to the same public information that we did when we started seeing green buildings, and you'd see a LEED silver or a LEED gold placard and you thought, oh, they thought about sustainability as you walk in that door.
In the same way that the LEED rating system has had a tremendous impact on the market for green design around the world, rating systems that measure resilience will drive both the private and public sectors towards true sustainable design.
Public policy research shows that rating systems, they can powerfully influence market behavior, not just by giving people more and better information when they make decisions, but in a way that's less coercive, not necessarily passing a law and telling people what they have to do. People start wanting to build, serve, produce differently because they know they're going to be rewarded for offering that better product, because the fact that it's a better product is easily visible to the consumer.
One of the biggest misconceptions that we've tried to dispel through the Resilience Advantage is that code compliance is synonymous with resilience.
Going back to this theme of our building codes and the focus on safety, if we don't focus on usability or repairability, that could be a potential scenario, meaning you have a major earthquake in an urban center like Los Angeles, where we don't expect the number of fatalities to be very high, but you could foresee a situation where some percentage of the population are not able to reoccupy their homes after the earthquake.
As we saw over the course of the Resilience Advantage, both private and public sector owners are recognizing that it's not enough just to ensure that new projects meet the minimum safety requirements of building codes. When it comes to essential services necessary for a business or government agency, the ability to remain operational can be critical. and it is vital that the entire project team comes together with that goal in mind. An example of this type of collaboration occurred with the Clifford B. Allenby building in Sacramento, a new office building for state employees that will be providing essential services to communities after a disaster.
Everybody got on board really quickly. I think the contractor was really excited to be involved in this, really excited to be able to build a building that is resilient and be a part of that, sort of pushing the industry forward in that direction. The architect also was very excited about it too. ZGF is a leader in their field and they're trying to push the sustainability forward, and I think them understanding that this building was going to perform after a large event sort of plays into that long-term sustainability goals of the project that maybe couldn't be sort of quantified in any other way.
Another misconception is that resilience is only accessible to the wealthy or to large companies that can afford to invest for the long term. Casa Adelante, a 9-story, 100% affordable senior housing apartment building in San Francisco, dispels this myth. The project structural engineer was able to integrate new technologies into the design of the building, so that for an additional investment of less than 0.25% of the building's construction cost, this award-winning project will provide a home that is not only safe, but livable after even the largest events expected in the Bay Area. While some developers are recognizing the opportunities to design new buildings to be safe and functional after a major disaster, in any city like San Francisco or Los Angeles, 80 to 90% of the building stock was built before our modern codes were developed.
Existing buildings are a huge part of this issue. In fact, I often think there's far too much focus on new buildings. 1 to 2% of our buildings are new on an annual basis. We tend to focus on that and focus on the code that addresses those and very little on the existing building stock. You know, from a sustainability standpoint, the highest and best use of an existing building is to find out how to use what's already there.
One of the core messages behind the Resilience Advantage is that resilience is good business. We've talked about owners and developers seeing the direct financial benefits of preserving their assets and their businesses through mitigation and resilient design. Reducing liability should also be a major incentive for owners to reduce the risks that potentially vulnerable buildings are posing.
Even though you didn't have to comply with a local ordinance, there was still the law of general negligence. You as a building owner, as a property owner, notwithstanding the fact the city had set compliant dates way into the future, as a building owner, property owner, you still owed a duty to people to make sure that you took necessary and reasonable steps to make the building safe. You couldn't just sit back and do nothing. You had to know your building, and you had to know what was necessary to do to bring it into a safe condition.
That's why every owner of an older structure, like the 5 types we mentioned previously, should have their building evaluated by a structural engineer.
My first advice would be don't talk to your lawyer. Talk to your engineer. Talk to your architect. Talk to someone who can tell you what the condition of the building is. Get to a structural engineer, to an architect, to an expert who can identify potentially dangerous conditions on the property and can identify what the remedies are for mitigating that possible problem.
From large projects like the seismic retrofit of the UC Berkeley Memorial Stadium or the Anheuser-Busch factory in Northridge, to historic hotels in the heart of downtown Portland and the California Central Coast, to soft-story affordable apartment buildings in Los Angeles. The Resilience Advantage has highlighted the diversity of building owners that are making the choice to invest in resilience to protect their building occupants, their property values, and their businesses. One of those projects was the Society Hotel in Old Town Portland, Oregon. The 100-year-old historic, unreinforced masonry building was completely renovated and seismically retrofitted. The restoration of the hotel has not only made it safe, it has also revitalized the neighborhood in which it's located.
It's a real catalyst project for the neighborhood, I believe, because as I mentioned earlier, there are many, many other buildings of its vintage in the neighborhood which have not been upgraded yet, and they would like to. And I think our project provides real guidance for a way that that can be done. And after we completed our project, dozens of buildings transacted, sold, and some were renovated. And one right around the corner did a similar renovation, and we're very proud of that. And we'd love to see as many of the buildings in Old Town be preserved as possible.
We never want to lose sight that our buildings serve a larger purpose to create communities and support the people that live and work in them. Throughout this series, we've always tried to tie the science and engineering of resilience back to how these tools make our communities safer and better able to withstand the inevitable occurrence of natural hazards, so that these events do not become disasters.
And the way that we look at protecting communities is by trying to figure out how can we ensure that infrastructure and housing is in a better condition, that it is fortified, that it is braced and bolted, that there is infrastructure in the community that's flexible. Reducing infrastructure exposure will equate to a safer community when there is an earthquake. Avoiding disaster and avoiding the trauma of disaster should be our primary focus in this nation. The avoided costs of a disaster should be a preeminent concern when we're considering investing in infrastructure and housing.
Obviously, at the heart of it, we start to measure our performance not just in terms of safety, but in terms of how quickly we can return to function. So the concept of functional recovery is something we will adapt to. We're going to look at it from a community services perspective and say we need these sorts of services in this amount of time.
Communities that are being successful in achieving resilience recognize that it takes everyone, both the public and private sectors, to embrace their role and contribute resources to the effort.
So resilience is really a community effort. We as a city, I as a city, the mayor as a city, can't do it all alone. It really takes partnerships, and resilience really builds on itself. When businesses are able to continue, then they're able to continue to pay taxes to the city, which go towards police and fire and emergency services and fixing the roads. And it really is important when we think about long-term resilience to think about the economic consequences of earthquakes and how that's going to affect not only individuals and families, but how it's going to affect businesses and city and society in general.
What I would say is many people need to really think bigger about the consequences of earthquake and vulnerable buildings. It's not just about losing the building. There is a cost that is attached to that, obviously. And the cost of paying for retrofit versus losing your building, losing your business, potentially having employees, customers, clients lose their lives, and the liability that's attached to that, that's something that could change someone's life for the rest of their life.
We have highlighted cities such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Santa Monica, which have translated the understanding of their risk and the need to mitigate it into concrete policies and ordinances that have dramatically reduced the number of vulnerable properties in their communities.
Santa Monica was successful in having their seismic retrofit program initiated and passed by the community and city council, mostly because of the recognition of seismic risks to the city and the greater need for continuity and resilience. It's recognized that each city could be on their own for several days, if not several weeks, and resiliency is the key.
The USRC, as part of its mission, is working to demonstrate that it is not just mandatory ordinances that can motivate investments in resilience. Studies conducted by FEMA, the National Institute of Building Sciences, and the USRC itself have shown that resilience is pure and simple, good for business.
We've shown affordable housing projects in downtown San Francisco can be built for higher seismic performance for zero increase in construction cost. We've shown how projects throughout the West Coast for schools, for other institutional facilities can be done for higher seismic performance for 1% or less increase in construction cost.
Don't fall into the trap of thinking this higher performance comes with a big price tag.
Retrofits of existing vulnerable buildings ultimately make our built environment safer and protect our economy. The National Institute of Building Sciences found that investments in better than code design or in hazard mitigation return between $3 and $13 for every dollar spent in terms of property and lives protected and the social and economic preservation of our communities. The good news is that thanks to engineering innovation, achieving resilient performance of our new and existing buildings is both practical and affordable. Whatever measure you use, the benefit is clear. When a building is made more resilient, the benefits ripple out beyond just its owner and tenants, including the lenders and insurers and the community at large. That's why the USRC believes it's essential that these larger groups of stakeholders who benefit from resilience contribute to investments in it. This is echoed by our business leaders.
Well, I think one of the ways that we're going to get our businesses to actually retrofit is finding incentives, whether it's a private-public partnership or it's a city-funded program or it's coming from some of our larger utility companies, or, and I think that's the most important thing right now is to create support so it does happen.
If there's a way to fast track the permitting that shows a public and private partnership where the city acknowledges that they're making these changes because they're creating safer buildings for the community, safer buildings for employees, safer buildings in our city, that there really shouldn't be red tape there or long drawn out processes.
Preparation and resiliency has never been more key to our business community's survival. We must be resilient to ensure our buildings stand, our economy hums, and our employees are safe, first and foremost. We must safeguard our investments, our region, and all who live right here. When a building collapses during an earthquake, an owner or a leasee is left with no operating business, the communities face further extensive economic damages, and workers lose their livelihoods. These impacts of these events can be prevented, and that's why we all stand here today.
Despite the challenges of producing the Resilience Advantage series over this past year during COVID, meeting even virtually with so many experts in the field of resilience and moderating some fantastic panels during our webinars has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career. I'd like to personally thank all of those that have been part of making this series a success, including our major partners, panelists, the series producer Compassion Unlimited, and our series sponsor Optimum Seismic. We hope that through this series you've gained a better understanding of why resilience is such a vital priority for our communities and our businesses, particularly now. What we've been able to learn and share is that we must all be involved in making decisions that impact our resilience. When individuals and groups work together, change can happen. And change can happen in any cities or estates across the country when the knowledge is shared and a path forward is clear. I hope that you'll reach out to me through the U.S. Resiliency Council to discuss how you can be a part of this growing and powerful resilience movement. To me, the themes of the Resilience Advantage can be summed up in the USRC's E4 principle: engineering in the service of equity, the environment, and our economy. We're pleased to announce that beginning in 2022, we plan to continue with new Resilience Advantage programs focused around this principle, with different and innovative ways to communicate, including podcasts, webinars, and yes, in-person events. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next year as we continue on the path to a more resilient future. Well, thank you. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It was wonderful for us to produce, kind of just remembering all of the great interviews that we had and we did with folks around the country. So I hope you got as much out of it as we did in producing it. And I want to thank in particular our champion for this episode. They've been a champion of a number of our episodes, BizFed, the Los Angeles County Business Federation. In fact, they were really the first organization to join Optimum Seismic and the USRC in presenting this series when it began a year ago. And Tracy Hernandez, the founding CEO of BizFed, has just been a super supporter of ours. Chris Wilson is here with us today representing BizFed. He is a public policy manager, and he's responsible for issues such as housing and land use. Certainly, we've talked a lot about those over the last 12 months. Also transportation and trade. Prior to joining BizFed, he worked for 3 assemblymen in the California State Legislature over a period of 12 years. He's a graduate of the University of Phoenix, and he serves on the Planning Commission of the City of Signal Hill and also on the LA Metro's Community Advisory Council. So, Chris, thanks for coming in today. Thank you on behalf of the USRC and Optimum Seismic for all the support that BizFed has given us over the past 12 months. So I just want to, ask a few questions of you as a representative of the business community. The first is sort of the obvious one. Why is resilience so essential, so important to the business community when it comes to earthquakes and other natural disasters?
Well, first of all, thank you, Evan, and thanks to all the partners for having me. This is a very good question, but it's not a difficult answer to understand. Many vulnerable buildings house our businesses, our workforce, and our valuable equipment in our inventory. Think of it as, California houses our assets, and our assets are in these buildings, whether it's our workforce, our labor force, or equipment. So we need to make certain that these buildings continue to stand and operate following an earthquake. And we have to do our best. BizFed believes that the best type of action is being proactive and not reactive. It's something that, over the last 12 years of working for the legislature, I've learned that the legislature often waits for crises to happen versus us, being more proactive. So we can no longer kick the can down the road on important issues like this, like resiliency, because one day there may not be no can to kick. So, BizFed believe this is the top of BizFed's priority. It continues to be, and we want to thank organizations like Optimum Seismic and the USRC for just being front and center on this.
Chris, thanks. We've tried to stress in this series over and over that earthquakes are a matter of when, not if, in California. We often, though, get sort of if something isn't happening right up front, it tends to be back of mind. I was fortunate, I guess you call it fortunate enough, to be at the World Series in 1989 when we had that earthquake. So there are certain things that get seared into your memory so that you never forget what they can do. Just last question, what are some of the things that you can envision the business community doing or promoting or learning more about to help improve the resilience of their own businesses or their members if you're an organization like BizFed?
I think that the number one thing we could do is just really educate our decision makers at the federal level, at the state level, because this needs to be on our radar. Look, I get it. Having discussions about earthquakes and natural disasters, they're not exactly dining room type of conversations that you want to have that makes people smile. But it's something that we can't just turn, like you said earlier, turn a blind eye to. We have to be able to provide incentives. We have to be able to educate our workforce on the importance of this, because as said before, this is the safety of our employees. I believe that you heard earlier in the video our CEO Tracy Hernandez mentioning that all this inventory are our assets, our workforce, our actual cost of goods sold, things that we export, import through the ports of Long Beach and LA, which are 40% of our nation's line, which we're in a crisis right now. So we can't wait for important crises to happen. We need to be able to head them off at the past. And so making sure that businesses like and organizations like Optimum Seismic has the incentives, has the tools and less rules to be able to produce in California and to protect these types of buildings, especially as housing development goes up, buildings go up, making sure that we have a strong a workforce and a strong incentive for businesses to be able to carry on is very, very crucial in California, and it's something that BizFed can't stress enough. And that's in our DNA. And we appreciate other organizations on this call, the Chamber, Optimum Seismic, BizFed, who really gets that, and we have to make sure that we educate other folks to be able to make sure that it's on their radar too. Our emergency is here, and our urgency needs to be now.
Chris, thank you. I really appreciate that perspective, and I really appreciate that perspective coming from the business community. So I'm excited about 2022 and the work that I know that we'll be collaborating on with a number of business organizations as well on making sure resilience is incentivized and happens. So thank you, Chris. And again, thank you to BizFed. Give our best to Tracy as well. So now we're going to turn to our panel, and we're excited to have on our panel 3 of the folks that you just saw on the video. And we're really welcoming them back to our panel. They've been on previous webinar panels, and I'm really excited to sort of hear their reflections about this past year and how it kind of all comes together. Our first panelist is Aaron Gross. He is the Chief Resilience Officer of the City of Los Angeles, and he's been a great supporter of the work we've done and really a great voice in the South, in Southern California, for why resilience is important. Ben Stapleton is the Executive Director of the U.S. Green Buildings Council, Los Angeles, and also has been someone who's really been focused on tying all the pieces together. You heard him mention in the video about this sort of Venn diagram of sustainability or green design and resilience. And that's just so meaningful to this idea of it's not one or the other, it's combining them both. And then Cheryl Rabinovich, who is the U.S. Resiliency Council's Director of Strategic Communication and really an expert in public policy. And she's been kind of essential throughout this series in always making sure that we have there's a theme, a strong theme running through what we do that connects all of this engineering and science and construction to the actual people that are living and working and benefiting from buildings. So thank you to our panelists. I'm just going to kick it off. You heard me mention at the end of the video how the USRC's sort of guiding principle, one of our guiding principles is engineering in the service of equity, the environment, and our economy. So I'm going to ask some questions kind of focused around those 3 areas. We're going to start with the environment, actually. So Cheryl, people don't like to hear bad news. I mean, we've tried, you said it on the series, we've tried to present the realities of natural hazard risks, but also provide practical and effective strategies to manage them. So, we've just had COP26 that has talked about the sort of inevitable path that we seem to be headed down in terms of having to address climate change. Do you think that the public is sort of closer to an inflection point, if you will, about their willingness to accept the reality of the damaging effects of climate change and earthquakes and invest in making changes to address those?
Yes, Evan, thanks for asking. I mean, I really think so. If advocates keep pressing and reaching out to more audiences and pointing out the similarities and connections between climate risks and other types of natural hazards that, humans have less effect on the cause, but they have a lot of effect on the impacts. So as I see it as a public policy professional, climate change issue is like 20 years ahead of us on earthquakes. The science says it's truly happening, it's accelerating, and now it's visibly having impacts that are felt by many. And it's hitting home emotionally and financially in ways that we're only imagining. predicting 20 years ago. With earthquakes, we have a body of ever accumulating science that says it's truly going to happen somewhere where it is going to affect you, even if it isn't in your town, because what happens in Long Beach affects me in El Cerrito, and that time when that effect is coming is getting closer, not farther away, because it's been a long time since these events happened and the earth is still accumulating stress on those faults. So we have to point out there are benefits to mitigation that can be reaped now, which will also lessen impacts felt by many later, and just keep hammering in on the personal value proposition to the people who are in positions to take important actions.
Thanks, Cheryl. Ben Stapleton, I listened in here and there to the COP26, video feeds. And one of the messages that was really coming out of that, which was sort of new for this current, edition of this summit, is that we have to start rebalancing our focus on adaptation to a changing environment, as much as trying to avoid causing those changes to the environment. That is, while we still work hard to lessen the impacts we have on the environment, there is an understanding that the environment is going to have an impact on us. So I just thought your thoughts from sort of the design community and the USGBC LA about how we're having to rethink our strategies or add mitigation and adaptation to those strategies.
No, it's a great question, and look, I'd love to think that we're going to head off the impacts of climate change, and the reality is that human beings don't change habits very quickly. We're still seeing now increases in our emissions on an annual basis, and so we do need to prepare our buildings, prepare our communities to not only be able to reduce the amount of emissions we're going to generate in the future, but also make sure we're going to be more resilient in the face of what are going to be climate changes. We're seeing that now, whether from increased risk of fire here in California, water scarcity is going to become increasingly an issue in the years to come, and then higher numbers of heat days. So that definitely impacts, how we design our buildings and our facilities, and really necessitates that, using a lot of the fundamentals of green building design becomes the basis in how we approach design overall. We need to create buildings, we need to create infrastructure that's really more holistic in how it approaches solutions to begin with. That means engaging with stakeholders from the very beginning. That means doing modeling and looking at, what if we do have 10 to 20 more days over 100 degrees in a community than we have now, 30 years from now? How are we dealing with issues around, rising sea levels in our coastal communities? So it definitely has to be a part of how we approach this. I think it's becoming more commonplace and more standard. Really from it all starts at the beginning of the day with the developers, the owners, the financiers. They need to be modeling in these impacts more into the buildings that they have. And we need to realize that, the assumptions that we may have had around risk for some of these buildings are very far off. The assumptions we may have had for useful life for building systems are probably, those systems are not going to last as long. And so owners and managers need to take note. People who are smart when they're looking at investing need to take note and think about this as they're looking at these assets in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. That's, the U.S. Resiliency Council has been talking with banks and insurance companies, and there's this recognition that, wow, we have to start incorporating resilience specifically into our lending practices, our insurance practices, and of course, as you said, design professionals, architects, and engineers into their design practices. Aaron Gross, you have, I bet, had just a crazy 18 months. We all see the impacts of COVID and the pandemic sort of on our personal level. You have the added burden of seeing it on a citywide level and seeing how just the way cities functions has changed dramatically over the past 18 months and, in the future, how they're going to change in terms of, work versus residential and reconfiguring spaces to fit the changes in the work environment. And all of that you've seen without a catastrophic earthquake affecting LA. So what I wanted to ask you was, what is the experience of COVID? How has it helped city planners, emergency managers, resilience officers like yourself to really think about the kinds of radical shifts that are going to be necessary to be better prepared for natural disasters like earthquakes or climate change?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think on a couple of levels, COVID has presented disasters in a different way than we're used to. To be honest, I think pandemics are probably one of the hardest challenges to prepare for. But one of the things that we've seen with this pandemic is that it affected everybody. And earthquakes tend to be local, specific areas, obviously floods, specific areas. But the pandemic wasn't just citywide, wasn't just statewide, it was worldwide. And so much like in the video, somebody commented about the worst time to prepare is right after something happens. But at the same time, that's when people are paying attention. And so the pandemic has really provided us with an opportunity to talk to folks about resilience, about sustainability, about efficiency in a way that specific, more targeted challenges don't. And so that's something that has been, as I look for silver linings in this, this horrible situation the world is confronted with, and there's a higher awareness. The other thing that the pandemic has presented is an awareness of the cascading challenges that come along with any shock or stress. It's not just that there was a pandemic. It's that schools were closed and businesses were closed and people couldn't pay rent, and kids, parents had to do with their children. And these same things happen in any shock or stress. And that's something that I think people are much more aware of. And so I think what's coming out of the pandemic from a city perspective is that there is more understanding that we need to incorporate resilience into everything that we do, that it's not a one-off and it's not an add-on. It needs to be incorporated into things we do, in the community meetings, into long-term city development plans, into all our water systems, our infrastructure. And that I think is unfortunate that we're learning this lesson in this way, but hopefully will highlight one of the kind of tenets of resilience, which is learning from what happens to us and building back stronger when we are coming out of the shock or stress that presented itself. So I hope that's what we have learned. I see that's what we've learned, and I hope that continues. And I plan to, not only as a city, but with all of the partners that you mentioned, all of the partners on this webinar, all of the partners that we continue to partner with, that it is an effort that we all have to engage in.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It is, it's a source of hope for me to see, how a big and complicated city like Los Angeles nevertheless take important steps and be a leader when it comes to resilience. Well, you mentioned Build Back Stronger, or Build Back Better, I'll say, and that's a good segue into sort of the next topic on our economy. I think one of the pieces of very good news that has come out over the past week is the signing of the historic infrastructure bill on Monday. The country is about to make $1 trillion+ investment in repairing and retrofitting our nation's bridges, roads, utilities. So I wanted to just kind of throw this out to everyone and get your thoughts about, how do you think the infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better bill, how do you think, what kind of impact do you think they might have on the public and private sector also being willing to invest in restoring our building stock, the infrastructure in which we live and work, in addition to, say, our bridges and roads? So I just want to throw that out if anybody wants to comment.
I'm happy to maybe start off the conversation. I'm sure everyone has something to add, but I think this is a really pivotal moment for us, just to have this focus through this plan on, how we're going to spend this kind of money, how can we leverage some of this public funding through other kinds of financing, private financing or others, to invest in our buildings that need it. I mean, we talk a lot about new buildings, but the reality is, 98% of our buildings are the buildings we already have today. And we really need to look at how we're going to not just, weatherize these buildings and improve their efficiency, but address the resilience in those buildings. And the two should be done together. It makes sense from a financing perspective. It makes sense from a cost effectiveness perspective. So I think the conversation needs to really go to now, okay, we've got a commitment on public funding. We have this moment. How do we leverage that from private financing standpoint? How do we really approach our existing buildings in a holistic manner so that when we're looking at a retrofit that is looking at, the seismic issues, that's looking at the building envelope, all those sorts of things, while looking at the efficiency, the lighting, renewables, and all that goes into that. So it needs to really be a holistic approach.
And
Thanks,
Matt. Sorry. I would say, I would also say one of the things that we've seen with this pandemic, and that we know from any shock or stress, but we've seen dramatically during COVID, is that any shock or stress disproportionately affects communities that are more vulnerable. And so my hope with the influx of funding coming from the state and from the federal government is that we will be able to focus a tremendous amount of that money on communities that are most vulnerable. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's a more efficient way to protect our economy and our people and our property lives, to focus on areas that are more dense or have older building stock or are going to have more heat days. And that, I think, is a way to hopefully be more efficient with the money that's coming in, but also be able to provide resilience for those in most need. I would say, in addition to that, there are so many different ways to become more resilient. Some are more expensive and some are less expensive. And I think it's important that we create an awareness and we create the opportunities for people to be able to take advantage of this money and create ways to create or provide as many resources as possible to become more resilient, whether it be retrofitting or whether it be communities getting together or whether it be emergency plans or whether it be making buildings more efficient. There is such a range in price tags for all of these things, and we should be able to provide a menu of opportunities to be more resilient to all of our communities.
Cheryl, did you want to add anything?
My first thought as both a taxpayer and a public policy expert is it would be a serious mistake, a tragic missed opportunity to make these new infrastructure investments without making those investments resilient to hazards as well. A single event, could wipe out decades of progress in terms of green construction we've done in the past and are planning to do. We could lose so much of that new value that we're creating if we don't also consider the resilience in there. I'm going to double down on Aaron's comment that our programs need to be more targeted to make risk reduction investments more equitable. And that's going to take disproportionate, over proportionate compensatory effort and resources and genuine involvement of those populations in planning and implementing those programs. It's really important. It's not only the ethical, humane, the right thing to do. It's also the biggest bang for the buck in terms of reducing future suffering and need for disaster relief. So it's right on so many levels. I think the country is more ready right now to see that. And I just, want to make sure that we continue pressure on state and federal implementers of this bill to really hold that tight. Just some quick thoughts. A lot of programs that are already available, we just need to make them a little bit bigger. Like in California, special loan and incentive programs for energy efficiency and solar, seismic projects are also eligible. So just taking other programs that are working and kind of widening the envelope a little, as Aaron said, make them a little bit more comprehensive. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just kind of expand the overall budget, expand the project sizes or the types of projects that are eligible. We have some great programs for individual homeowners in California around earthquakes. The Brace and Bolt program from the California Earthquake Authority, for instance. But, what about the neighborhoods and the special districts? Or maybe let's structure the program, add a component in the program that's targeted at nonprofits and small businesses that deliver a lot of the services that we know that we are all dependent on now. So that the incentives go not just to sophisticated big players. Remember the PPP loans. Who gets the new incentive can be really stacked. So those are some of the factors that I hope we're going to be pressing our public leaders to include.
Well, thanks all three of you. That's a great discussion. I'm gonna have some questions specifically around the equity side in a minute. But these are some really good, valuable information on just why this is important from a purely economic standpoint, why this all benefits, these things benefit all of us. No building is an island, if I'm going to copy a phrase. And that's what we see, that buildings are where things happen, where people live, where lives intersect. And so it contributes to the well-being of the entire community. Ben, over the course of the Resilience Advantage, we've shown lots of examples of new construction that's been built resiliently, and also existing buildings that have been seismically retrofitted. And we've showcased ways that are affordable. And we're also designed not just to protect the lives of the occupants, but the property and the businesses of the owners. As a structural engineer myself, I can speak with some understanding of the fact that engineers and architects still often find it hard to be the ones out there making the case for resilient design, or to have those conversations with their clients. I'd like your thoughts, because you're in that environment now, particularly with your work with the USGBC-LA. How do design professionals do a better job of starting these conversations with owners and stakeholders about the value of resilience?
No, it's a great question, and I think oftentimes what sort of hurt our movement, both in the green building world and in the resilience world, is that we don't talk about the money enough. Things need to be cost effective from the beginning. We need to talk about ROI, and the reality is that the framework that we use to look at ROI in real estate in general and in buildings today isn't really taking into account all the factors, right? And I think we've learned some of this through the pandemic over the last couple of years, and being more aware of the environments that we're in on a day-to-day basis. But when architects and engineers are approaching clients, they need to start with, look, I'm trying to create the most valuable building for you on a long-term basis, and here's how we do this. We look at the sustainability of the building, we look at the resilience of the building in the face of climate change, in the face of natural disasters, and we look at the performance of the building in terms of the people in that building. How are they going to be most productive? Are they going to have the right amount of ventilation and access to natural light that's going to make them healthier, more productive people when they're in these buildings? Because we're not taking into account the health impacts of our environment on the people in the space. That value is not reflected in the buildings. It needs to be more taken into account and reflected in the rental rates that we're getting for apartments, the rental rates we're getting for office space. So that part of the model needs to shift. And also the long-term value of the buildings. This is part of the value of having a LEED certification or an Envision certification from ISI or another institute. Is these certifications are marks for people who are investing in assets that, okay, this is going to have a longer term asset value. And there's data to back that up that say this asset's going to be worth 5 to 10% more over time. It's going to perform better. And so architects and engineers need to talk about the money part of this up front, just as much as they're talking about, oh, this is the right thing to do for these reasons, from a performance standpoint, or because this is the latest and greatest technology. That really needs to be a central part of the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I agree. And hopefully we've been able to show a bit through this series that the science is understandable. We've tried to make the science understandable to the audience. So if we can do it, engineers and architects should be doing that as well. Aaron, you mentioned this a little bit previously. Everybody thinks of, well, coming from Northern California, we call everything in Southern California LA. So I apologize to the 88 other cities or the 87 other cities in the region for that. But that's sort of my point, is that, there are a lot more cities in Southern California than just Los Angeles. And LA is really just one of the few, actually, that's enacted seismic retrofit ordinances for vulnerable building types. But we also know that while we see the lines on the map, earthquakes don't conform to city boundaries, and neither does our economy. Our economy, obviously, it just spreads throughout the whole region. People work in one city, live in another. There's trade between cities. So, but as the leader, and I could say that I could ask the same thing, say, of the city of San Francisco up here in the Bay Area. How does the city of LA envision itself as sort of a leader in promoting resilience across the entire Southern California region, and in particular, as we get into the equity discussion, particularly helping cities without the kind of resources that LA might have? How can they achieve the same kinds of successes?
No, I think that's a really important question, because as you mentioned, disasters don't care about city lines, don't care about who lives where and what streets you have to take. And I think that's an important point, because as I mentioned with partnerships, there's not one entity that can do this all together. I'm sorry, not one entity that can do it by itself. You mentioned COP26. Mayor Garcetti actually just got back from COP26, talking about on an international level about the things that we need to do to make for a more sustainable and resilient world. But he also understands that it needs to happen at the local level. And while the international community is talking about lessons learned and what best practices are, we need to do that at the local level as well. Los Angeles has this amazing ability, because we have so many resources, such a giant city, and we've tried to be innovative with partners and tried to incentivize innovation, but that innovation needs to go beyond the boundaries of the city of Los Angeles. Mayor Garcetti, early in his term, brought together all of the mayors, all of the 87 mayors within the county of Los Angeles, to talk about issues that cross boundaries: poverty, resilience, water politics, economic development. And I think resilience is absolutely one of those things that, if a city has a good idea, we need to share that, and we need to provide information, help other cities understand not only the importance, but also how they can learn from the lessons that LA has experienced. LA, as an international city, we love to be on the forefront. We love to be a leader. But it's not just leading to lead, it's leading to help solve problems in Los Angeles, but beyond Los Angeles. And we have relationships with cities locally, nationally, and around the world, where we share best practices, whether it be C40 or the Resilient Cities Network or the Climate Mayors. That is important, that those partnerships and those experiences and those successes and failures are shared and discussed, so we can be more efficient with the solutions that we have for everybody.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks very much. This discussion of equity, you can see how it has so many different components. We have traditionally populations that are underserved, that are more vulnerable to the effects of natural disasters. We also have communities that are smaller, less able to provide resources on their own. And we also have small businesses. So actually, Ben, I was going to ask you a bit about this. When it comes to green design, LEED and U.S. Green Buildings Council and all that, there can be a perception out there that it's great if you can afford it. You see headquarters buildings and big city buildings and all that getting their LEED Gold and LEED Platinum ratings. But, for a lot of small business owners, that just doesn't pencil out sometimes. FEMA did a study, and it said that when it comes to resilience, they said that 40% of buildings or businesses that close during a disaster never reopen. And of course, most of those are small businesses, mom and pop businesses, that kind of thing. And gosh, we have seen how the pandemic's effect on small businesses has been so profound. How do you extend this idea of equitable access to resilience to our small businesses as well as our vulnerable population? So let's talk about small businesses.
No, it's an excellent question, Evan. And look, as we continue to see the increasing impacts of climate change, we're starting to create even more of a two-class society where those who have the resources to deal with those impacts and have access to those resources are going to be better prepared, and those that don't are going to be more impacted. And again, we sort of are at this profound moment right now with this federal investment, with the awareness we're at of what's happening in the world, where we can hopefully shift some of that. And so, to your point about whether it's a LEED certification or a WELL certification or others, I do think a big part of the challenge is access and cost for those. And I think what we have to think about is we need to make sure that equitable access is there to the principles of these certifications, and that we're implementing the principles of these into policy, into codes and standards. Oftentimes people ask me, should I get a LEED certification for this project or that project? And my answer is, well, is it going to have value for you from a branding perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a perspective of when you go to sell this asset, being able to show that level of value. But that's not needed for everyone. And as an example, we launched a program last year called our Healthy Building Alliance, which is a commitment, not a certification, to 5 simple principles around occupant health. We did that as an equity issue because we found a lot of people were struggling with how to have healthier space during the pandemic. And there's no way they'd be able to afford a certification for their space, hire someone to go through that process, or for them to spend the time. But we need to get the awareness, the principles, the education of this kind of stuff out there. Once people have knowledge, they don't unlearn things. And so we need to make sure that that's accessible for folks and is simplified when it comes to resilience measures. And again, keep taking into account, some things that we're most at risk for here in California. But we also need to make sure that we're rolling some of that stuff out through policy, codes, and standards, and providing access to financing. I think Cheryl mentioned earlier, there's great programs that are out there that currently, address other issues, whether it's financing renewable energy or energy efficiency retrofits. A lot of those are available and open to seismic retrofits and other things like that. We need to make sure that financing and that awareness around that financing is really extended, and that the mechanisms are there for access from a policy and code standpoint.
It's actually a question we've gotten from our audience about, getting the government and businesses to really take resilience more seriously. It's no secret that we live in a very polarized public policy setting. It is difficult sometimes for us to agree on anything, it seems. So Cheryl, I wanted to ask you, in your experience, and what kind of ideas do you have about the most successful ways to motivate positive change around resilience so that all of the stakeholders see this as not competition, but as a win-win? So maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
Sure. I'll start with kind of the personal and business side of it first and circle back to government like you were talking about if we have time. But I mean, the best thing in communication, in convincing and persuading, is to start where the other person is. So what's in it for them? And you can't really understand that without going to talk to them. So there's a communication, a relationship building, a discussion, a two-way discussion. It doesn't work to just come in as an expert, I've got the solution for you. You have to arrive and say, what are you worried about? I've got something I can help you with one of those worries, and let me, does that work? How can we make that work? We try to do that in this series, try and go meet people where they are a little bit more, talking in plain speak, making it virtual and on demand and free, and a lot of involving a lot of different voices. So it's less technical. But I hope that you all stay tuned for what the Resilience Advantage has in store next year, because we were very limited by the pandemic and kind of how we could do outreach around these messages right now. But we're going to try some new ways next year in our next phase. and try and do more of that two-way communication that I think is so essential. If I had just two pieces of advice, one is, start small and start cheap with mitigation. There are a lot of very modest, low time, low cost, high yield things that you can do, especially starting with the preparedness part. That's often a really good gateway for people to feel empowered right away, see results right away. So we don't really have time to go into those examples, but let me frame it this way. When you're thinking about any big moves for the future, spend a few minutes thinking and ask yourself a few questions or others about how natural hazard risk might affect your project or your plans, and what can you do about it. So not out of fear. This ties into what Ben was just saying, not out of fear, but because you're looking for opportunities. For the engineer, the architect, what can looking at resilience help you do for your client to help you win that bid, to deliver more value for them? For an owner, a retrofit usually makes financial sense when you're doing other kinds of upgrades and renovations, or sometimes when you're selling a property. Well, why not invest a little bit more upfront by handling seismic or in combination with some of the other issues, and you immediately increase the value in your rents and marketability, safety, how long it's going to be until you need to do the next renovation, and the functionality down the line, and reduce your liability. There's so many wins, immediate and long-term, that can come from making that little bit more investment upfront. And for a retrofit, sometimes that can be tough. It doesn't pencil out unless you include those broader benefits, unless you're thinking about the neighborhood around you and how they're thriving because you did a renovation helps you thrive down the line. So unless you consider that, kind of triple bottom line, not just your own bottom line, that can really help you see the benefits.
Thanks, Cheryl. I want to just reiterate this as we near the end of the webinar. We've had a couple questions about affordability and practicality of resilience for old and new buildings. We've shown a number of examples in the Resilience Advantage of when good engineering pays for a lot of that extra cost, and you can take a building that might be minimally code compliant to one that's resilient for no extra cost or less than 1% of the building cost. So in that sense, it's very practical when you think about the ability to protect your asset and your business. And even when it comes to retrofitting buildings, what's clear is that retrofit is not resilience is not an on-off switch. You either have it all or you have none of it. You can improve buildings, and we see that happening all the time. I mean, all we have to do is sort of look at the soft story retrofit programs that have been going on in places like San Francisco and Los Angeles and other cities in Southern California. And we see that the cost to seismically retrofit a soft story apartment building might only be $5,000 per unit. And when you think about the amount of risk that reduces, both for life safety issues and, of course, for damage to the property, those are the kinds of investments, especially if, as Ben and Cheryl have been saying, we can get investments from others that benefit, incentives like banks, like lenders, like cities. It really makes that cost relatively small. And there are a lot of other types of vulnerable buildings as well that can be made safer, made better at a reasonable cost. And Cheryl mentioned liability. It's something that we have mentioned a couple times in the Resilience Advantage. You saw Madison Spock in this latest episode. The question from the audience was, how does negligence relate to earthquake liability? Well, what the way Madison describes it is, negligence is not just about knowing, it's about whether you should have known. So it's never enough to say, well, I didn't know my building was a risk. The question that a jury and a lawyer will ask is, well, should you have known? And if there's one thing we all know in California, and we didn't need the Resilience Advantage to present it, but we certainly highlighted it, it's that we face earthquake risks. There is simply no doubt, and you can't be a building owner in California and say, "Wow, earthquakes! What do you know about that?" This idea that you could know and should find out about your building is what really opens building owners to that kind of liability. And the way Cheryl described it, I really liked it, is that you can take steps, small, incremental, but positive forward steps to reduce your risk and your liability. And those kinds of things work. Those kinds of things have show that you aren't being negligent, show that you are trying to make your building better. So what we hope that we've described here is that resilience is everybody's issue. It benefits us all, and the lack of it hurts us all. There are solutions to be found. There are solutions in front of us right now that architects and engineers and contractors are implementing in buildings that are making buildings safer, more resilient, affordably. And that it is everybody's responsibility to contribute to resilience, not only for the protection of our environment and our economy, but also for the equity of the region in which we live. With that, I am just so grateful to have had this panel on, because I know this panel has been sort of with this series for the entire year. And so I appreciate your thoughts. I appreciate the thoughts of the attendees and asking these great questions. On a personal note, I just want to say that while this has certainly been a challenging year for everybody, it has been really a very rewarding one for me. The number of people that we've gotten to meet, I think we've done over 50 interviews, and you'll see some podcasts come out of these interviews, these many interviews next year. It's just been very rewarding to see how everybody gets it. They get that we need to be more resilient and that it benefits everybody. So I've learned a lot. I hope that you as attendees and the other panelists and all those who have been participating in the interviews have learned a lot as well as our champions and sponsors. With that, I really want to ask Ali Sahabi to come back into the conversation. Again, you see him for a couple minutes on these webinars, but that doesn't begin to tell the story of how involved he has been in the work of making the Resilience Advantage happen and making sure everybody knows about it and making sure that, we are gathering leaders together in a way that is working forward towards a common purpose. So Ali, if you're on, I'd just like to get your thoughts about what this last year's meant to you and what you see for the future.
Thank you so much, Evan. It's really, truly been an honor for me. I'm so proud of what we have accomplished together. You and I, this came out of a very simple conversation more than 2 years ago, the whole webinar series in Culver City, a conversation we had with Colin Diaz of Culver City Chamber of Commerce. And here we are. We're at the end of the first end of the first series. And I really feel that we have made an impact. I hope all of you that are watching us feel the same. I really, really appreciate our major partners, LA BizFed, LA Area Chamber of Commerce, and LA EDC, to have been with us from the very beginning. And I truly appreciate these wonderful speakers that have joined us. And if we look at the list, they are truly the best of the best. Look at our Ben Stapleton with our U.S. Green Building Council, one of the largest chapters in United States, representing some of the best in the field, some of the most active in the field. Look at Aaron Gross being our Chief Resiliency Officer of the largest city in the state of California. And the list goes on and on and on. Of course, Evan and Cheryl, that really have been amazing to really so thoughtful to bring so many important things and present it in a way that is constructive for our future as a whole. So I really am proud of having had the opportunity to be supportive of these efforts and be part of it, and all of the other our partners that continuously every month we approach them, they still with full-heartedly communicated our message and invited their members, and we're really looking forward to continuing this effort. And we will be communicating with all of you regarding our efforts, continuing with USRC and the commitments that we have made on behalf of Optimum Seismic to do this work. And then until we have and we see that some of the other parts of the our communities that haven't been able to follow through with some of these thoughtful as much as they want to. So we're going to try to be there as much as we can. And at this time, then I turn it back to you, Evan. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ali. Thank you again for this series. And again, thank you to our partners. We've mentioned them, Ali mentioned them. They have been great contributors, not only to the content that you've seen, but also to the promotion of the series. I am asked from time to time about membership in the USRC. We are a nonprofit organization. 501c3, tax deductible. We would love to have you join the resilience movement by becoming a member or supporting the USRC in any way that you can. And as Ali has hinted, this is not goodbye, but so long for now. I hope we all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a wonderful holiday. But we will see you in 2022 with some great new ideas and new thoughts and content. And we can't wait to continue this discussion with all of our stakeholders, with all of our partners about how to make our community and our world more resilient. So again, thank you all for coming today, and thank you all for your participation in the Resilience Advantage.